Welcome to today's Scientists Needed. We're going to be talking about how you, as people with STEM backgrounds, can use your skills in local government. But before I do that, I want to just make sure that we put our virtual hands together and introduce Arti Garg, who has really created the space for us to be here today, the founder and chair of Engineers and Scientists Acting Locally, and the planning commissioner for the city of Hayward. So an enthusiast as a scientist of public service herself. Take it away, Arti.
Thanks so much, Jake. And thank you everyone for being here, including this amazing panel that Jake has put together to speak to you about opportunities in state and local government. As Jake mentioned, I'm the founder and chair of Engineers and Scientists Acting Locally. We're an organization that's just celebrating our 6th birthday. So it's actually kind of exciting, and it's exciting to me that we can sort of put on events like this. We founded ESAL with a fairly straightforward mission. We recognized that there was a need for people with backgrounds in STEM skills in state and local government. I actually came prior to sort of getting started with local government engagement. I came from the federal government, and there are programs designed to attract scientists and engineers to working in federal government, but not as much emphasis on what STEM skills are needed and what sort of STEM perspectives can bring to state and local government. And so our mission at ESAL is pretty straightforward. Let's get more scientists and engineers engaged with state and local government, and then let's provide all of you with resources to be more effective in doing that. And one of the great ways to do that is to help you figure out how to actually not just get engaged like me as a volunteer commissioner, but really potentially change careers and work in state and local government. So we have a lot of discussion planned. I'm going to keep this real short, but before I hand it back to Jake to introduce our panelists, I just want to let you know a little bit more about what we do at ESAL. In addition to virtual events like this, we have a lot of original content, blogs that feature organizations and individuals making an impact in their community, other types of resources like playbook guides that walk you through ways that you can effectively engage through government processes that are available to everyone, because I think that's important. You don't need a special fellowship to get into state and local government. You can in fact apply for a job or attend meetings and use other avenues of participation that are open to really anyone who lives in a community. We also do sessions at conferences. And if you have a group that's interested in a particular topic associated with local engagement, we offer custom workshops to train you on various aspects of local engagement. So we do a lot of things. You can learn more about what we do through our website and also by subscribing to our newsletter. So I hope you do that. I hope today's event inspires you to engage with us more, because we'd love to hear from you. But I'm going to stop talking and hand things back to Jake, who is, but I'm going to introduce him very briefly. Jake is a particle physicist by training, but now he is a technology director for Engineers and Scientists Acting Locally. He is also, in some ways, what you might aspire to do as an outcome of this panel. He is a data scientist with the California State Water Resources Control Board. So he himself can offer some perspective about how to get hired and why it's so great for an engineer or scientist to work in local and state government. Take it away, Jake.
All right. Thank you, Arti. To that point, I'm going to start actually doing the introduction of the folks that you're seeing up here on our share. So now we'll actually get down to the folks that are making this happen today. So I really am excited to be here today. And like Arti said, this is my passion. I got to go from that science background into this world of actually jumping out there and doing something in government, right? So this is really you can do this, and we have a bunch of panelists here who are excited to tell you about how you can do this. I also just want to say that I know we've invited a good number of hiring managers to this event just so that they can come and see what we're talking about. And if you happen to be one of those folks who is trying to scout that talent that can be so difficult to find, we have created this Airtable where you can go and drop in some information about any opportunities that you have. We'll follow up with the recording of this event along with the list of all those opportunities afterwards. So this is in reality a way that you can jump into this right now. So to start our introduction without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mylin Nguyen, who is a chief at the Environmental Division of Nevada Department of Transportation. So she is a professional engineer with decades of experience in managing engineering, research, regulatory oversight. These things, when I first came into science, may have been words that were a little scary. But she is the Environmental Division Chief at Nevada Department of Transportation. She leads professionals, engineers, scientists. She is increasing awareness of these problems. She's increasing stewardship in her community. She creates a better space for her community by being a scientist who is in a leadership position. So she has held many positions. She was formerly the chief of the Safe Drinking Water at Nevada Department of Transportation, project manager for Water Research Foundation in Denver, and just all these wonderful experiences to bring to the table. But her training is bachelor's and master's of science and engineering from the University of Nevada and a PhD in civil engineering. So this is, very real, STEM background, government career. So welcome, Mylin.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. So where are you currently located?
I'm sitting in my office in Carson City, Nevada. That's the capital of the state of Nevada, next door to California.
just over the hill. So what would you say is your favorite part of working in public service?
I think the thing that got me hooked after a few years in working in the state is the opportunity to go out and meet the people in the community that we serve. And unfortunately, because I work in the state government, I was able to go to multiple different communities, get to learn about their different needs, and being able to answer questions and bring solutions. So you can make a difference by being able to talk to people that, that they're to listen to the daily thing that concerns them that we may not sitting in
right.
headquarters somewhere. So that's my favorite part. And that got me hooked.
Getting out there and engaging with that community. Oh, I
can make a
definitely feel that.
Yes.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you, Mylin. I'm going to next introduce Jason Lawley. So he is the Deputy Director for Data Services and Engineering, the California Office of Data and Innovation. So this is actually really exciting for me because I got my position because of Jason Lawley. So just, well, not because of, but he told me about it. So this is, just us trying to do this for more folks out there. Jason has more than a decade of experience using civic data, including data management, analysis, visualization, and engineering. So before joining the state, he had done even more local, hands-on Chief Data Officer of the City and County of San Francisco. So he's got both that state and local experience. He drove efforts to make open data and dashboards available to the county pandemic response. He worked with his team to plan, implement comprehensive and automated reporting for PPE inventory and distribution. So these are critical government functions that really need somebody to support them with those skills. So before the pandemic, which we remember those times, he operationalized the city data strategy under Joy Bonaguro, who was then Chief Data Officer of San Francisco, in setting up the process where they copied the world over for managing an open data program. So they created this initiative that now I get to work under in my current position. So please welcome Jason Lawley.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Jason.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I'm glad you joined the state.
It really did. So where are you currently located, Jason?
So I'm in San Francisco. After the pandemic, or during the pandemic, the state allowed more remote work. And so I'm very lucky I get to work in San Francisco. And I do go up to Sacramento occasionally for sort of hybrid work. But yeah, I'm based here in San Francisco right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great advantage of one of the silver linings for sure. So what would you say is your favorite part of working in public service?
Yeah, so when I first got started, I mean, really, it's about the potential for impact. what's interesting is in my trajectory when I worked at the local level, I have additional background in urban planning and information technology. So as a planner prior to even coming to the city, but one of the things that I was doing prior was consulting, working with a lot of cities and regions and going around. And it was really a great way to start my career. But I wanted to kind of get on the inside and really have the impact rather than kind of from the outside in. And so working in local government for 7 years, I got the opportunity to really touch a lot of very local issues, the pandemic being one of them, but not the only, thank God.
Yes.
And that there is something that's just it just feels real. You feel really good about the work when you put your head down on the pillow at night. You know, I just feel really good about what I do. The other thing about public service, and that especially that I'm getting at the state, is scale. So at the local level, we touched a lot of people. San Francisco's 850,000 people, diverse population. Really love the getting down on the ground. But one of the things that I'm experiencing now at the state is that there are so many wonderful people working across so many different programs and areas, from climate to housing to energy,
Right.
to water.
Yeah.
And that just being able to kind of work with those people and help them have impact and scale, it's just really exciting because it's like a multiplier effect. I get to have that kind of impact.
Yes, putting your skills to work, I mean, it's inspirational. It's definitely the way I feel about this work. So I couldn't agree more. Thank you for that, Jason. And hopefully we can continue to inspire folks to follow in your footsteps with today's panel. All right, so moving right along, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Catherine Hall, our third and final placement panelist today. Dr. Catherine Hall is the Deputy Director of Population Health and Health Equity at Boston's Public Health Commission. After receiving her PhD in microbiology and molecular genetics from Harvard University, she spent 10 years in biotech industry, tackling problems of drug discovery, and she became the Assistant Director of Drug Development. So she's got quite the career. She then returned to Harvard Medical School, joining a fellowship in integrative medicine at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and received a master's in public health from Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. She's an assistant professor in the Division of Preventative Medicine at Brigham Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Her academic research focuses on placebo effect, in particular how the absence of placebo and presence of nocebo effects influences health equity. She's also the author of Placebos at MIT Press and has a master's in documentary film from Emerson College. So very interesting past, another wonderful one of our panelists. And thank you so much for joining us today, Catherine.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
It's wonderful. And where are you joining us from today?
So I'm joining you from not so sunny Boston.
Oh, well, we've got all across this country, we've got people a need to lead from our STEM professionals. So thank you. So what would you say is your favorite part about working in public service?
Well, I really kind of build on what Mylene and Jason said, because it's certainly, I love meeting people and seeing the people who your interventions affect, and hearing from them like what they need, and kind of working collaboratively with them to figure out how you can have an impact. And also I really love the kind of the turnaround time. And when you're doing research, like I think early in my research career when I was studying pharmacogenomics, it was a long way from, the bench to the bedside to really kind of see the impact of what you were studying. And I was actually talking to a collaborator at Harvard Medical School from when I was doing more kind of basic research. And they said, can you really have an impact? And I was like, well, we had 1,500 people show up for our COVID vaccinations, and we can see by the numbers that we are literally with shots in arms preventing COVID. And we know that in preventing COVID, we're preventing long COVID, we're saving lives. And so it's tremendously satisfying to really translate on the ground some of the innovations that COVID has unfortunately brought us, or, at least that's the fortunate part of the pandemic. And so whether it's wastewater or, vaccinations,
Right.
or, using sophisticated modeling to understand masking, I think we can really see and have an impact on this pandemic.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought it to that, this modeling piece that, you might be an academic in your lab thinking like, oh, I've got this really powerful skill of, mathematics, and it's really important to my field of study. You might not realize those same skills are what we use to help people. Yeah, wow, that right there says it. These skills put to use save lives. So save lives and improve lives. All right, well, thank you so much. All right, now that we've got everybody introduced, I'll bring us all back together here. There we are. And I'll go into some questions. We've just prepared a couple, but I want to encourage folks, we have some people that we have some folks in the chat. We've got almost 50 people sitting here, and we would love to hear you guys and your questions as they pop up. If you have a concern, if it's something you're worried about, go ahead and drop it in the questions panel or drop it in the chat. This is a friendly space for you to learn more about this. This is our goal today. So if there's no stupid questions here. So first off, we kind of covered my first question, what drove your interest in working in state government, with our icebreaker. So I'll move along to, what are the ways in which people with STEM backgrounds can bring value and unique perspective to that state and local government desire? Catherine, you talked about this a little bit. I'm going to start with Jason, just because we'll start there and we'll kind of move around as these questions evolve.
Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of talked about sort of the scientific background and how important. I mean, the state employs a lot of PhDs in a lot of different agencies and departments doing really important research. So that's one area. And then when we talk about technical fields, technology, if you're tracking anything that's happening at the federal level and more at the state level, the need for modern technology, modern approaches is needed in the state. And there are more and more people pushing for that. So if you have a strong technical skill set, be that even in data analysis, or in just technology itself. I mean, my background, I started in information technology, went to planning, so I had the subject matter expertise combined with technology, and now I do a lot of data engineering work, supporting engineers, but it's all pointed toward ultimately a really important subject matter areas. So we don't do technology for technology's sake. So if that resonates with you, if you are a technologist who also wants to impact something, the state is a perfect place to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's how you can have an impact. Wonderful. Mylin, how would you say people with STEM backgrounds bring that value and a unique perspective to the public service?
Yeah, in my experience, actually, I like the answer from Jason and Catherine had touched on this before too, is I did come from research background and I love doing research, and it takes a long time. So when I became a regulator, some of the things that I touched on 10 years previous and we're starting to talk about the regulatory implication of these, subject, in my case, mostly water quality issues and treatment techniques. And so having that STEM background, having that perspective, and I worked on this more than 10 years ago. And now it's slowly made its way to the state and to the local government, see how we can implement it, and having that background to be able to communicate that in a practical way, so that the people that, not only the people we regulate, the people that we impact, have an understanding of, hey, this is why we need to do what we need to do. And so having, being able to communicate in the language that make a difference for the community, for the stakeholders, for the people impacted by that regulation, by that guidance, or by the technology, it's a huge advantage. And sometimes when you talk about the checklist of, oh, this is the regulation, this is the code, this is the law, it's more practical to talk about the why in terms of, this is science.
Right.
in the practical realm, how it works to, to support your community.
Mhm.
And so I felt having that advantage is making a very big difference. But being able to communicate that
Yeah.
is also an advantage.
Right. And that's what we need, scientists who can communicate. Catherine, I saw you light up a little bit there. Do you want to jump in on this question?
I love this question because there's so many pieces of this, right? There's so many ways that what we've learned in college or in graduate school at the master's level and the PhD level in STEM can have an impact. I find that the people that have the greatest impact for us are the people that have this technical background and are able to translate it to whatever the problem is in front of us, right? And so whether you work at a macro level or a micro level, so whether you're a machine learning expert, we can study things at a national level with big data, which is what the benefit of machine learning does for you, right? But then we can then translate the finding to the local level and ask, are we seeing this, pollutant having an impact, or this, this environmental other insult having an impact on a local level. So we can be kind of hypothesis generating on the macro or micro level. And so having that technical background is indispensable in the present environment that we're in, where we have to ask so many complex questions quickly and use the power of all the data available to really kind of answer them.
Yeah, that technical mindset to bring that information and remove bias and make sure that you're really answering the question at the deep level is something that science teaches and engineering, technical backgrounds teach. Wonderful. All right, so let's get into, we've got a question in the chat that I'm going to answer as kind of a follow-on to this next one, which is, how did you find your first job in state and local government? Because I know this is what I was really concerned about. I didn't see an entry point. I didn't even know that there was a way to do this. So, how did you find your first job, and how did your background with STEM help you get that position? Because, I think people within the government can kind of see like, oh, of course those skills are relevant, but at first it might not seem that way. So I'll start this one with, so how did you find your job, and how did your background in STEM help you land that position? Mylin, why don't you kick us off here?
Yeah, my experience may have been quite unique. Of 16, 17 years ago, I was in research, and I had a very fulfilling career as a project manager in a nonprofit research organization. I'm making a difference, working in an area that I'm very passionate about, which is to increase access to safe, clean, and affordable drinking water.
Right.
To people. So I thought my career would be that, but I had a need. It was in Denver. I had a need to move back to Nevada, where my family lives, and my father has asked me a question, and he goes, "You, with all that training, and you couldn't even find a job in Nevada." So I was like, I'm trying to show my dad that I made an effort. So I apply, and that was, in the early 2000s, internet was booming, but it's still new to me. So I went online and I found these advertisements for environmental engineering position, which not really in the water area. I applied for a couple of them, some in air quality and one is in hazardous waste management, which is in my training, but it wasn't something that I really focused on. And so I applied, and fortunately for me, the people who were looking for a water protection engineer was looking on other lists. So my first boss found my name in a different hiring list and basically introduced me, my application. They didn't know me, who I was, but they saw my application and this person is totally a drinking water person. And so he gave it to the hiring supervisor at the time and say, hey, you need to interview this person. That's how I was told. And so I got a cold call and asked if I was interested in interviewing for a source water protection engineer in the state of Nevada. And I said, of course. And so I interviewed, and it was a phone interview. They didn't know who I was. There's no profile on
right. Yeah.
And so I got the interview, and 2 days later they called and offered me a job, and they said, oh, you can be a source water protection engineer, or you can create a new septic system regulation for the state of Nevada. And I said, I like drinking water. I'm going to pick source protection. And so I I didn't know how long I would stay. They asked me, how long would you commit to this position? And I said, because I have a need to move to Nevada. I have a very job that I really love. I can commit to 2 years. I won't go anywhere. And after 2 years, I stayed, and I'm still with state government because they have made me feel welcome and that I had value to contribute to the different programs and initiatives that the state had introduced at the time. So it was a unique timing, and also I found my calling based on the experience working with the people that I did and making a difference in the community and the state of Nevada. Well, I call it my home state.
There you go, your home state. That's wonderful. What a story. Catherine, you were chuckling along there. What do you want to get on this? How did you find your first job, and how did your background get you into that position?
Well, I want to say every job I've had has been from my network. I can't think of a single job that isn't from my network. So just to really make encourage people to always be thinking about building their network and keeping those connections as strong and as broad as possible. And so a colleague of mine had moved to the same thing, had moved to the city government. And so when COVID was happening, I reached out and said, hey, if there are any, I was thinking like a volunteer opportunity or something to help out with COVID.
Right.
So we need somebody, with your background and in public health. And here's the interesting and I think important part. I have done a lot of things in my life, and I didn't necessarily think like public health was my thing. But I had another colleague take a look at, I was just talking and they were like, oh my God, you've done this, and they list like 15 things in public health. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm a public health person. And so I really reframed my narrative around that. And I haven't looked back. Like I see myself as a public health person. And it's been, by and far the most satisfying place for me. So I think it's all about like keeping that network, because you never know kind of where the edges of your network are going to lead you. And so, yeah, that was it for me.
Yeah, just putting your throwing your hat in the ring, saying, "Oh, I'll help out. Maybe my skills can help out." And it's an interesting thing that we're getting some great questions on these topics, but I want to make sure that Jason gets a chance, a stab at this question. So how did you find that first state local government job, and how did your background, your technical background, help you land that position?
Yeah, so an interesting story where I definitely agree. Networks matter. My first job was in nonprofit. I also was in Denver, a different time, but for a little bit. And that was 5 years at a national nonprofit called Place Matters. And I was first connected to that through graduate school and internship. And it was the perfect first job for me. It combined planning, urban planning, and technology. And basically we were looking at innovative ways of bringing more people into the decision-making process around urban planning. So we would do scenario planning, data analysis that we'd actually bring into meetings, and we would turn them not into games, but into scenarios where people could actually interact and understand what the trade-offs were. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. But as I mentioned earlier, I was getting tired of dropping into cities and regions. And then we had a capacity building mission at the nonprofit as well. We're often on these contracts. And I remember one client, I was like, oh, we're training you, we want to build the capacity. And they looked at us and they said, well, you're the capacity. And that was I was like, oh, that took the wind out of my sails. But not everyone said that, but it made me realize, I was like, okay, I really enjoy capacity building. I want to be the capacity. I want to help build capacity internally.
Right.
So I started looking for local, and I had a couple of goes at it. So I applied for planning positions in the city and county of San Francisco. My first email that I got back was, congratulations, you've made a list. At the time, I didn't understand the civil service hiring process. And so I was really confused. But I read, I'm a reader. I like to understand things. So I did do enough and I was like, oh, this is how it works. Anyway, fast forward, I didn't get those interviews. I wasn't far enough up on the list, close
Sure.
enough, not far enough up. And then there was an innovation fellowship opportunity at the mayor's office in San Francisco. And that I applied for, and there was a really great match because all of the work I had done at the nonprofit for local impact, innovative approaches, et cetera, really resonated with the folks that were selecting for that. And honestly, that has essentially set my trajectory. In fact, I now work again for the chief data officer, who's now the chief data officer of the state. Talking about networks, it definitely matters. I followed her there to do similar work at the state. So yeah, it was an interesting way in, but I am definitely glad I made it.
Yeah. And, you know, Jason, that inspiring story, and I mean, it's very similar to my technical background. It inspired someone in the chat. This is a question directly for you. They want to be a potential urban and regional planner. They're learning ArcGIS right now and have some background knowledge in Python. How did you get that first job? So like, what was your the thing that you saw? When was that moment you were like, oh, there's the job board. Here's the thing that really I can latch onto.
I got super lucky and I'm very grateful. I had an incredible advisor in grad school. I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and he was connected to the national nonprofit I worked for, Place Matters. He was connected to another foundation that the nonprofit spun off of. It's a whole, but basically got connected through him to an internship opportunity, interviewed for that and got that. And then that internship was I enjoyed it so much that they when I was in there, they're like, hey, we'd love to hire you back once you're done with. And so I did. That doesn't happen for everyone, but I think what the advice there is definitely lean on if you're still in school, leaning, or even if you're alumni, lean on those folks, those contacts and networks, and make those relationships. They can really kind of point you toward really interesting opportunities. Right. That was my experience. There's obviously other ways to go about it, but that's how it worked for me.
There you go. All right, thank you for that, Jason. I'm sure that's going to help out our panelists. And to keep moving us along, I want to focus a little bit on, people in our chat are talking about, in the same way that I was when I was looking at this, there's this kind of, what's the challenges I'm going to face? It's the unknown unknowns. You've never really gone in and done that. So what is the biggest challenge that you face transitioning into government? And to kind of fold in some questions from the chat, what would you say in the onboarding process and getting you through those first couple of months? What are those challenges that you're going to face? What can people expect? Do they need to be nervous about something? Are they going to face some kind of people are not going to like them or other them somehow? What are those challenges that they might face or that they might be concerned about, or you were concerned about starting out? And Catherine, I haven't started with you yet on a question. So you want to start this one out for us?
Sure. I mean, I think the challenges really depend on A, the individual, B, the level of the position and the position, and obviously the organization, right? But the types of challenges that I've seen have been about, who's doing what, right? You think you're over here doing this thing, but actually somebody over here is doing something similar, and kind of figuring out the silos and creating that communication across silos so that people can work collaboratively. I think that's one I've seen just across the board in city government. I think another one is kind of, it's kind of fascinating. There are some positions that are union because this is the kind of nature of city government. And I think understanding, because you come out of an academic setting and you literally work 24 hours. I mean, I think you just kind of never stop. But in union employees, which some of our epidemiologists are, they have a very literal time that they're supposed to be working, and it gets very complicated, like what's overtime. And so I think making that kind of mental shift, if you happen to land in a union position, is an interesting one. And then I think the last piece is kind of, just kind of understanding and translating what is the ask and how am I going to get this done? Because there's so many talk about networks within the
Yeah.
organization. There exists the network, and understanding all the pieces of it and who you really need to kind of
Right.
talk to and when, and I think is
Almost clicky.
yeah, almost clicky. So I think that just to give one piece of advice, like entering with a combination of an open mind and a resolution or intention to get things done, and also recognizing that this behemoth existed long before you came, and its behaviors are not because of you, but they will, you might don't take it personally.
Right.
But
You got to
just
know the rules. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear that. Oh, that's well said. And I saw Mylin light up on that. So you want to, and we talked a little beforehand. I think you want to take this one away, Mylin? You're muted. Sorry. You're so excited to answer.
Yeah, actually, yeah, I like Catherine's response. Coming to any job, but especially in government job, having an open mind, being able to be flexible, to be adaptable in the sense that, your previous experience to me, it's going to be very useful. Don't think that you have to give up anything just because you're going to join government work. All the skill sets, all the background will be applicable. It's just the timing. And also in government work and in state government as well, is you have rules, regulations, policies, guidance to ensure fairness and consistency, right? So first you get to understand your position, what's required, what is the mission, a purpose of that position, how it relates to others around you in that department, how it serves the community. Have that communication, that networking and dialogue happening. Sometimes it's not happening on your time scale,
Right.
but it will happen. And to have that persistence and patience is very important. And when I say patience and persistence, I don't say it's being, sometimes you have to knock down some walls to understand your connection. But for the most part, it's the nature of the job is that, like Catherine said, the institution exists way before you, and it will last way after you. How you make a difference, how you change things, it may be slow, it may be quick. It depends on the mission of that position. It will happen. And so, those challenges, I totally agree, but coming in with that open mindset is a huge advantage.
Yeah, and I know that I know a little bit about this, and being a technologist inside of the government, but I'm excited to hear what Jason has to say about this, breaking down walls and things moving really slow and then really fast. What do you think are some of those challenges that, and how maybe somebody coming from that technological background into the government, what are some of the things they're going to face in the first couple of months?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to add to, I think, to echo all the things that have been said. I think one thing I would add here is, and this is not necessarily specific to public service, but if you're coming from maybe research or academic institution or something like this,
right,
when entering any large organization of even in the private sector, you're just entering into complexity. There's going to, especially, and you'll hear, when you talk about government, you often hear people talk about highly federated organization. They might say something like that. That's very true of the state of California. That was actually true of the city of county of San Francisco, even though it's smaller. But yeah, I think that's just being aware of that. There's just built-in complexity. It's just, and that's it. That's okay. That's kind of part of the design of these large organizations. Is it's going to be a little hard to wrap your head around all at once. One way to address that, though, is to just not take it all at once, right? Take it by chunks. Make really lean on the folks that have come before you. Do meet and greets, coffees, like be proactive in that. Hopefully you have a manager who will help you do that. And that's one other thing I'll say is government's not a monolith like any other. We have a tendency to be like, oh, government's this or that, right? But just like any other organization, there are different roles for different kinds of people. And I think being mindful that just because, even my example of like I applied for a planning role and didn't land that and got the innovation, right? Sometimes you do have to be mindful and thoughtful about, like, just because you didn't get that job over here, maybe that wasn't for you. Maybe there is something better. So just keeping that, again, that open mind that folks have talked about, and really being, if, you know, keeping an eye on the prize. If you really, really are interested in impact and you really want to get,
Right.
you can get in. There's plenty of work to be done.
Good. Yes. Everybody who's listening, that's, you know, we are singing it loud, and it's true. And these questions that are coming in, they're really heartfelt. I mean, I know that I was really nervous about these things. You know, am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be able to fit in? Are my skills going to matter? And absolutely. Okay, so we'll keep moving along here. We've got a lot of good questions coming in. So I'm going to move in a little bit more into the. So now that we've talked about, yes, you are needed inside of this system, I want to get into a little bit about, you know, I know that you folks have, all of our panelists today have worked within the hiring system that exists within these kind of government systems, the monolith that Jason was talking about. But of course, there's these pieces. So navigating that can be really hard. So as someone who's been involved in that hiring process, what are some of the top qualities that you look for in a candidate, or what does, and then kind of complementing that, what does that hiring process look like? So the list that Jason was talking about, what does that look like in your process, and what are the things that can help you kind of navigate that system as you're going along applying for these things? So Mylin, do you want to start us off there for this one? Oh, you're still muted. Oops. Thank you.
I can speak for the state of Nevada, within the state of Nevada system.
Right.
Yeah, we mentioned the list, and I got on a different list, and somebody found me. But there is hiring lists. There are hiring lists for different positions within the state, and it's being managed out of the central state human resource system, the Department of Administration. So all external candidates and even internal have to get on a hiring list for the specific type of position, classification, class spec, they call it. So if you want to be a professional engineer, you have to get, you know, on the engineer list. And then sometimes we hire specialists. So we put out a special call off a specific skill set for specialists. And then that list would be smaller because it's specialist. But either way, you can't just be hired just because, you know, networking is great, but you can't just say, hey, this guy would be great. I'm going to, you know, ask this person to come in and work. You've got to get on the state hiring list for the specific position. And then we, as each agency, have a need for those positions, will ask for that list. And then we will go down the list to find the best candidate on that list to interview and make an offer for the best fit somehow based on the needs. So yes, the hiring list is very, very, very important and true in state government. So get on that list.
Get on the list.
Did I miss anything on that question?
No, I think that's great. And Catherine is going along and answering some of these questions in the chat. Do you want to take a minute to swipe at this, kind of, you know, navigating as a person who's seen the hiring process, you know, what are some of the things that qualities they can put forward, and like Mylin was saying, lists and these things to navigate?
Yeah, you know, there's so many critical factors. I think you want to appear to be enthusiastic, but not like, I can't quite figure the word, but sometimes people are like, they're too much energy, but not, I mean, you want to be that in-between person. So you're very calm, but you're upbeat and you're excited about the job. And I think you want to really have practiced your spiel, like how you describe your background, how do you describe your skill set, and really read the job description well, so you understand what they're looking for. And then, you know, don't be afraid to add, you know, extra stuff, you know, like it might be, I mean, this is not a great example, but, you know, they might have said SAS programming, but you also add that you code in R and Python, you know, but you still have said like, and I know SAS.
Right.
So you want to kind of, I see you and I raise you, but all in a way that I think has a kind of solid, calm confidence. And then I think that really listening to the questions and answering the questions are important, but also if you can, and I know people are nervous when they're doing interviews, but kind of like really being present, you know, keeping your eyes on the screen, listening thoughtfully, interacting, like demonstrating that you would be able to work in a group. We had a person who like would talk over people in an interview, who didn't answer people who didn't answer the questions, other people who, you know, they were looking up at something, and somebody was reading for something, like all that stuff is like, you just kind of, it gives people pause when they see that. So try and be as present as possible, as prepared as possible, as thoughtful as possible, and really kind of represent yourself in the best way, and then kind of add in what you can add in as you go.
Be yourself. Yeah, it's so hard to do that in the moment. It can be very intimidating, especially if it's your first time in this whole new field. Academia has this kind of way of presenting yourself, and it's different inside of government. So, Jason, I want to toss this to you, and I want to add in something that's kind of from the chat. It's this: how can government make public service work appealing to science and tech experts? Their skills are certainly needed. So how can we draw in those experts as kind of part of this? You know, I know that your shop's involved in these things. So you are, you know, actively recruiting these new things, you're building these new positions. So how is government or the state of California trying to appeal to these folks, and what should people try to put forward when they see those opportunities?
Yeah, I actually, I can't post to everyone in the chat. So I'm wondering if you can copy and paste my
On it.
chat.
And
great, thank you. So I'm sharing this, basically, just a quick plug, we are hiring at the Office of Data Innovation. I'm not going to go into those, we can talk about those later, but at the link there, innovation.ca.gov/join us. We actually have the Office of Data Innovation actually created a step-by-step hiring guide, or a candidate experience guide. The email at the bottom, odi-talent-team@innovation.ca.gov, we have a talent team that actually will work with you to guide you through the candidate process. So a couple of things that we do actually as part of our process, and to answer your question about making it more appealing, we can't change the process, but what we've done is tried to make it a little less scary, a little bit more palatable. So it's explain in clear language what the steps are, and then have that sort of concierge, almost like if you have any questions, like somebody's there to be like, okay, this is what you have to do. This is the exam you need to take. And you know, using language like, hey, exam might sound scary, but it's not as scary as you think it is. And like really trying to help people understand, because the process is very different from the private sector. It's another thing we use in our interview structure. We actually, the beginning of every interview, we actually say, the interview process is very different from the private sector. And we actually take people, we explain to them that it's going to be very structured, because we've found, especially people coming from private practice who haven't done public sector work, it can feel very like awkward. People even like, did they like me? But those interviews can be very structured, and that's because we want to make it fair. We want to make sure that we have a fair process. But we do that balancing act. So you can find that guide on that website. It's actually applicable to all of California hiring, at least for civil service roles. There's some nuances around other roles, but I won't get into. But there's some information there. And yeah, and then what we're trying to do is do more recruiting efforts at the state, especially around, in our case, around data roles, trying to make those more palatable. And the other thing I'll just mention, and you can copy and paste this, is California just launched a new initiative, Work for California, in light of the recent layoffs, especially in and around the Bay Area and across California, and really nationally. But we have launched essentially a form that you can fill out. It's not a job application. It's just an interest form that says, I'm interested in doing these kinds of things. And then what CalHR does is kind of matches that in the background. And then if there's some matches, that someone from relevant departments or others may follow up with that. So this is a nice lightweight way to sort of register your interest and your skills, and so so that we can help with matching. So it's a recruiting effort to really help people connect to state service jobs.
Great. Yeah. And that answers that question perfectly. How can state governments do this? Well, as Jason said, and I saw this when I was working in the Senate, states are building these things right now. How can we draw people in is becoming a real effort that's happening. And especially with modern technology, these platforms are starting to evolve to help people pull in. So they provided some. I dropped folks from our panel put stuff in the chat. There's a question out there, and Catherine responded for Boston's for international folks who are looking for positions and trying to work for the government. Sounds like Boston, Catherine's positions are available. For Mylin and Jason, is that something that people can pursue from international backgrounds, or is that something that they, or is that not going to work for them? Jason, do you want to start that off?
To be honest, I think the policies kind of vary quite a bit. So I'm not sure if there's a one size fits all. My advice has been to ask that question to the hiring. So if there's a posted link to just like a hiring manager, there's generally some kind of recruiting person behind that can answer those kinds of questions. I don't want to say anything wrong because it varies based on all sorts of different statuses and things like that. So it is possible. I just, it will vary. And so I think my best advice there is if you have a question, ask that at the upfront and see what's possible.
Mylin, do you want to tag anything onto that?
Yes. So for specialist positions specifically, like engineers and scientists with international background, I am aware that the state had hired, actually within my agency, the Department of Transportation in Nevada, we did have some hiring from international applicants, and they tend to be engineers and scientists. I think the one thing there is some hoops to jump through, of course. Once we get that done, the visa process could be processed. It takes some time.
Right.
One of the things that I want to highlight is for engineering in Nevada, to be a professional engineer, you have to be licensed in Nevada. The licensing in other country may not work. So you may want to get a license that is internationally recognized, like so then you can translate that and then bring it to Nevada, and then Nevada can convert it with additional requirement. But within 6 months, you probably would able to do that. So there are some hoops to jump through, but that we do have experience hiring from the more STEM and specialist background.
Okay, Catherine, I know you responded in the chat. Do you want to?
I absolutely want to add something because I think this is a really important point. Because we've had people who were very promising candidates who didn't mention this issue until late in the process. And it's not that we can't do it, it's that we feel like the people were disingenuous, and then that kind of leaves a kind of sour taste in your mouth, and you're like, why didn't they?
Yeah.
So you really want to kind of, I mean, I wouldn't lead with it, but within the first, interview, especially if asked directly, you want to answer that as clearly and honestly as possible, and really get to it quickly, so that nobody feels like they've been misled. I think that's really important, because if they can't do it, they can't do it. So whether you find out early or late, they can't do it. But
right.
Because it could be that later on you now have your papers, but now you've already kind of burnt that bridge with people. So
right.
Thoughtful about that.
Yeah, the kind of Jason said this, Mylin followed it up, reach out, be transparent. I think people are going to appreciate that. And if you start with that, then, if it's going to be a disappointment, then at least you'll know it right at the beginning, and you won't get halfway through the process and then have that happen to you. So it can be hard, but steel your will, send the email, those resources are there for you to take advantage of, those hiring managers, those people to reach out to. Okay, so we're getting pretty close to the end here, and we've had a lot of great questions from the audience, and I kind of went off the rails and started pursuing those. So thank you all for those questions. Something here that I want to get into is to bring it back to that training that you do have. And one of the concerns that we're seeing in the questions is, so is your potential to be hired by the government limited by your education level? So how much of government roles are dependent upon general science communication versus your technical expertise, that is represented by a PhD or something like that. So maybe you're a great science communicator, but you just stopped at a bachelor's of science, then that's not a bad thing. That's totally an accreditation. And this is specifically from someone who recently graduated and undecided about grad school. So I'd love for our panelists to answer this question and to just speak about how your training did incorporate into that and what parts of your training mattered. So Jason, do you want to start this question off?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I hate to give the like it depends answer, but it really does. I'll speak from our like the world that I know. So really is just it's based on the role that's being hired, right? So there are certainly entry-level roles at the state, entry-level classifications that allow you to grow in, and you can very transparently find, and this is the nice thing about the civil service hiring system, is that very clear like minimum qualifications, what's required of the role, et cetera. So when you're looking, really kind of you kind of look at that, get to know those. I mean, I to study all the classifications, but get to know those a little bit in your area. And generally there's going to be a laddering of sorts. And so you can kind of use that to find roles that may meet where you are. And yeah, it will depend. The level of expertise will vary based on the role. You know, a lot of the roles that we're hiring for at the Office of Data Innovation, for example, because we're such a small organization, they are more senior roles, just because we need that kind of expertise in the organization. But we're looking to make sure that we provide especially from a DEI perspective, opportunities for more entry-level roles and positions. So there's definitely space for that. Yeah, but it will vary.
Right. And I know that just from reading the classifications when I did it, what Jason just said, reading through some of them, it can seem really like it's really dense, but a lot of those titles are just copy pasted into a lot of roles. So once you learn kind of what's going on, you can start to see what are the ones that could fit for you and where's a job that you'd like to work, where's a place that you could fit in. We're getting to the end here. So Catherine, I'll let you take it. And then I think we'll close out with Mylin. Oh, got away from you.
Yeah, my mouse. I think going back to it depends. I think it's really important to just apply. Don't be afraid to apply for a job you think you're over or underqualified for, because there's so many variables. Like you don't know how many other people are applying. You don't know how well the hiring manager wrote those requirements, because everybody's kind of doing stuff very quickly. And so it might be that they're like, see you and they love you, and you can't always predict that. So I would always cast a broader than a wider net than a more narrow net. Certainly in our organizations, the hiring manager is the one who's reading all those CVs. So there's not somebody, for instance, in HR who's reading every single CV that comes in. So you can actually apply for multiple jobs. I think if you apply for 2 jobs that sound like they're in the same department and they're at different levels, I think that's where you kind of get confusing to the hiring manager. But certainly if you applied for the higher or lower one, they might kind of slot you around depending on how they see you. But I would like if you're somebody who has a communications background, but you also can do some community engagement or some data analysis, like those are likely going to be 3 different departments. And I would apply to all of them, write different letters and kind of customize your CV. But I think, and if somebody then says, hey, how come you apply for all this thing? You just say, like, I have very broad skill sets and I really want to come work here. And so sometimes also, you might want to take the job that you get offered. If it's not perfect, sometimes just getting your foot in the door is important, because then people see you and say, oh my goodness, what do you think of this position over here? So again, it depends, but be broader as opposed to narrower.
Yeah, your volunteer experience may be the thing that just like really puts you there. So just foster those skills that you think are relevant. You put everything on there and throw it out there. You don't know what people are going to grab out of the air. Mylin, you want to round us out here?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I agree with everything was said. I wanted to add that, sometimes when we advertise, we said minimum qualification. So if it needs a master's degree, then you need to have a master's degree. If they ask for 10 years of experience doing specific things, then you need to have that in order to make that list. Other than that, if they only require a bachelor, you apply for it. And it's really the interview, once you get to the interview stage, is what people want to get to know about you. That's the hiring manager, the person who supervises you, will want to know about you and how you fit into that, you know, either the teamwork that exists, or they want an overhaul of the system, right? So they want some fresh ideas. So all of that will happen at the interview process. So just to get on that list and make sure that you meet the minimum qualification, that's all you need. Thank you.
Right. And sometimes sending that email to somebody, you know, that you saw their email online and you know they're advertising a position, you just send them an email and you say, hey, I'm really interested in this thing. Do you think I could make it work? And, you know, they might be able to help you out. You know, you might get a chance. So throw your hat in the ring. Be fearless. We really do need your skills in the government and in public sector in general. So I hope that this has convinced you, and our wonderful panelists have given us some heartfelt attributions to that point. So I want to thank everybody, put their hands together to thank our panelists. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll join you again. We'll follow up by email with all the resources, and any other opportunities that we find, we'll filter into that table and send your way along with this recording. So make sure you share it with any friends that are on the fence about public service, and we'll see you again next time at another ESAL event. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.